What's this? A letter for me.
Welcome to another episode of TTM Thursdays, Through the Mail Thursdays with Remember the Great Sports. Today we're going to go through 3 envelopes. One is for sure from an NBA, ABA legend. He put his return address on the envelope, so I am for sure know who that is, and I'm not going to show that on the screen to give him his privacy. But I believe the other 2 are also NBA successes. So I'm going to open these up first, and we'll see what we got. So the first one is postmarked from Indianapolis, Indiana, and it is indeed a former NBA player. And this is former Indiana Hoosier from the University of Indiana, Scott May, on 1, 2, and 3. Signed cards in blue Sharpie. Scott May actually was a very good collegiate player. He was on the 1976 championship Indiana Hoosiers, starring as a small forward. He also played on the 1976 United States Gold Olympic team in basketball. He was drafted by the Chicago Bulls with the number 2 overall pick in the draft in 1976. And he spent from 1976 to 1981 with the Chicago Bulls, a season with the Milwaukee Bucks, and 1 season with the Detroit Pistons in 1982 before he went overseas with his talents and played from 1983 to 1988 in the European game. I believe those are Italian teams that he played for. I don't speak Italian, so I can't translate that well. But some of the things, he was the College Player of the Year in 1976. Excuse me. All-American in 1975 and 76 in the NCAA. He is a member of the Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame. He was inducted in 2017 with that honor. His pro career, he averaged 10.4 points per game as a small forward. In his collegiate career, let's see if I can get those numbers really quick here. I cannot. I apologize about that. But he is a very well-known Indiana Hoosier. One of the best Indiana Hoosiers ever to play. Isaiah Thomas obviously has probably got that, honor locked up. But part of a very important Indiana Hoosiers history, and a very good pro as well. His son, Sean May, actually wound up playing in the NBA also. Most notably also played at North Carolina for the Tar Heels. So that is indeed his son. Probably wouldn't mind tracking down an autograph of him so I could have the father-son combo. But Scott May, nonetheless, former Chicago Bull. Very happy to get a few of those in my collection. I am going to do the one that I know next, because we're keeping the trend of Indiana basketball greats. And this is probably one of the most underrated ABA, NBA players ever to play. And that is former University of Evansville / Indiana Pacer, Don Busey, if I'm saying that correctly. And I believe it is Busey or Busey because his nickname was Boo. He went by Boo Busey, basically. Or I could be completely pronouncing it wrong, and it could be Bus. But I believe it is Busey. So, Busey also played for the Phoenix Suns, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. And he signed 4 cards for me, and he actually put his return address on the envelope in sticker form, and I always keep those, but I am not going to share his address, on live video. You can find his address. It's not that hard to find. But a little bit about Mr. Busey. Hopefully I'm saying that right. He played for the Indiana Pacers after he had a very successful career at the University of Evansville, the Purple Aces. I believe he won a National Division II championship. Yes, he did, while playing for Evansville. After his collegiate career, he was actually drafted by the Phoenix Suns. Now, back then, you had your choice, though, of playing in two different leagues. Either you could play in the ABA or you could play in the NBA. Well, Busey decided that he would rather take his talents to his home state in Indiana, and he chose to sign an ABA contract to play for the Indiana Pacers. Well, as a Pacer, he won he won an ABA championship in 1973 with the Pacers. He spent 1972 to 77 with them. And then, once the ABA-NBA merger, he went back to the Pacers for a second stint under the NBA Pacers. So, who is Don Busey and why is he so underrated? Let's talk about that for a second. Well, Don Busey was a guard that was known for his offensive abilities and his prolific passing abilities and ability to defend other guards when needed. He was not a big-time scorer. I think the most he ever averaged in a season was like 13 points a game. So he's not, career-wise, scoring-wise, he doesn't have humongous numbers. Like some of the guards of that era, like Clyde Frazier and, guys, Earl the Pearl and, guys like that have far superior numbers because he only averaged for his career 7 points a game. And like I said, I think the highest he ever had was like 13 in a season. But he averaged about 4.6 assists a game, but more importantly, he averaged 2 steals per game as a guard, and that's pretty impressive. And he was an all-defensive player multiple times in his career, 6 times actually in his career. He was an all-defensive player in both the ABA and the NBA. He is somebody that is not really remembered in the folklore of basketball history because I think he spent most of his career in a small market like Indiana, and he also played for the Pacers, which were really an ABA team, during his era more than they were an NBA team. So after the Pacers more or less were successful, they had a situation where they were losing money, like many ABA franchises were, and they more or less had a fire sale. They got rid of, Busey, they got rid of Billy Knight, they got rid of a few other players. And that is when finally the Phoenix Suns were able to have him come play for them as they had drafted him many years ago. So the Phoenix Suns finally got their man, so to speak, after waiting nearly, I think, 6 seasons of him playing professionally. The Suns finally got their man. Well, after he left, after only playing a couple seasons with the Suns, which were, pretty good seasons, he chose to go back to the Indiana Pacers, which were now in the NBA. So he got to play there. Then he finished his career playing for the Portland Trail Blazers for a season. Then he played 2 seasons with the Kansas City Kings, which are now the Sacramento Kings. Again, the reason that you don't know who this guy is because he played in so many small markets. He played for the Suns, he played for the Pacers, he played for the Kansas City Kings. The Kansas City Kings, now the Sacramento Kings, were probably one of the worst franchises in the early 80s, along with the Dallas Mavericks. And, because of this, I think his skills on the basketball court are often overlooked. he was very talented at what he did, and he was, if you read interviews about him, you will hear other Hall of Famers talk about this guy's defensive abilities. And one of the things that I read that was most impressive with his stats was, for somebody that played as many minutes in his career that he did, I think it was like 20,000 minutes or something absurd like that, he had like one of the lowest turnover ratios in his entire career. Meaning, out of his entire career, this guy was a fundamentally sound player, but he wasn't the best at scoring. He was better at defending, and he was better at handling the ball and, just making other players on his team look good. I would compare him very similar to a Jason Kidd or a John Stockton or a Steve Nash type of player, except the scoring ability wasn't as good. Kidd, Nash, and Stockton obviously had better scoring numbers than Busey did, but as being a distributor, as being, a good defender, probably a better defender than all three of them. I don't know, Stockton, he's a pretty good defender. But, I would say the defensive skills of John Stockton, the court vision of John Stockton, the court abilities of John Stockton, just the scoring wasn't there like John Stockton. So, thank you, Mr. Busey. I hope that some people understand how important you are to this game, because to me, you are one of the greatest pacers that have ever played the game. Hands down. All right, so this final one, I believe, is also a basketball player, only because of where it's postmarked from. And it is postmarked from the state of Maine. And it is indeed former NBA Hall of Famer and Boston Celtic, Dave Cowens on 1, 2 as a coach, and number 3, which is kind of hard to see, but it's not too blurry, but because of the pen that he used, it looks like he used a fine Sharpie. It's kind of hard to see on that vintage 70s card. If he would have signed it in a nice thick black or blue Sharpie, I think it would look a lot better. Let's put it that way. But I really enjoy this card probably the most, and that's why I sent it to him. This is a 1990s NBA All-Star set, and it shows him throwing a hook shot in. I thought that was just the coolest shot. I mean, you do not see players doing that anymore. I mean, obviously Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the one that made that shot, possible for so many. But, seeing Cowens do that hook shot is just a cool card in my opinion. And this is, of course, him in his coaching days. So, Dave Cowens, one of the greatest Celtics ever to play. That's a long list, though, if you want to get down to it. Cowens played all of his career except for one season with the Celtics. He finished his final season with the Milwaukee Bucks, where he was, not a young man at that point. I believe he went to Florida State University, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Florida State University. And he was selected in 1970, in the first round by the Celtics, 4th overall. Now, as a player, he won 2 NBA championships with the Celtics in 1974 and 76. In 1973, he was the most valuable player of the league. He was an 8-time NBA All-Star. He was the NBA Rookie of the Year in 1971. He was named to the NBA 50th all-time greatest players when they had their 50th anniversary. His number is retired by both the Boston Celtics and Florida State University. So after his playing career, he did become a coach, as you can see from the Charlotte Hornets card there, up in the corner. He coached the Charlotte Hornets for a few seasons. before he was let go from those duties. He also coached with the Celtics. I was unaware of that. And he also coached the Golden State Warriors for a season. Then he also was most recently an assistant coach from 2006 to 2009 with the Detroit Pistons. So, an NBA Hall of Famer. Thank you very much, Mr. Cowens, for signing. Thank you again, Mr. Busey, for you signing as well. And again, thank you, Mr. May, for signing as well. All of you guys were great NBA and college players, and I will always cherish these autographs that you guys signed for me. So thanks for joining me for another episode, and as always, happy collecting, and I look forward to your comments below.